Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Thanks so much for joining me. It is great to be back with you. Today we're going to talk a little bit about, and why does it feel like so overwhelming watching the news? And I have conversations like 2-3 times a week with friends. Is this true? Is that true? Is this true? What's causing all of that? And what are 3 ways that we need to think about all of this information economy, which I heard recently that I totally agree with. We're moving from the information economy into the attention economy. And what you pay attention to matters more than how much. What are 3 ways to keep our sanity in the information overload of an AI social media universe? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit about some big ideas of how to think and what ways to think about some of these things. And we're going to do all that next here on the Chris Spangle Show. Thanks so much for joining me. It is great to be with you. I'm so glad to be back. I'm sorry I've been a little bit spotty. Cannot get into why. I will tell you later down the road. Nothing good, nothing bad. I'm not going to jail. Nobody's dead. Just can't get into it right now. But I was thinking yesterday. So we watched Harry Potter this weekend. It's October. We have a 5-year-old. She is now of the age where we felt we could tell her about Harry. We could show her Harry Potter and she wouldn't have nightmares and need to sleep in our bed. And so we're like on 5 or 6. And so we're getting to the spookier one. But I feel like, I don't know, the kid's favorite TV show. Come on. She's very advanced and developed. But at the beginning of 5 or 6, there is a scene at the beginning where Harry Potter has been... Gosh, what happened to Harry? Oh, he saw the kid die. I won't give names in case you've never seen it, but I mean, it's been 20 years. What are you waiting on? He sees someone die, and he's sitting on a park swing, and he's lost in thought. And then his cousin, his big fat cousin, walks up and starts bullying him. And he makes him really mad. And so Harry gets triggered by this kid unlike anybody else. Like, Voldemort doesn't trigger Harry Potter as much as his cousin. Isn't that the way it always... It's like the people closest to you that can make you madder than like like if it was your sworn enemy like Voldemort, you're like, I must have class in this moment of anger. But if it's your cousin or your brother or whatever, you're like, I'm going to punch him in the face. So he's on the park swing and the cousin is bullying him. And so he gets mad. Harry hops out of the swing, takes his wand, puts it up to the chin of the cousin. And he's about to do magic, which he's not supposed to do. Because if you don't know the story, he's a student, and you're not allowed to do magic as a student. And all of a sudden, before he does some magic, the clouds get really dark, and it gets really ominous. And it starts to come and circle over them. And clearly there's a bad storm, like you're in 5th grade playing basketball on your front lawn, and all of a sudden it starts swirling. You're like, this is not, I got to get out of here. They start running. So then they cut a scene, and then they're running. They're running from something, but you don't know what. Maybe it's the weather. That's what you assume. And they run down into this underground tunnel, like under a bridge, a footbridge, under a car bridge. And they're in this concrete tunnel, and all of a sudden some Dementors come into the tunnel and start attacking Harry and the cousin. I think Dementors are one of the greatest characters in movie history. One of the most useful characters in movie history. The idea of a Dementor can be applied to so many people. I've used it about people. I'm not going to lie. I'm not a great person. I have called people Dementors before. But Dementors are like these haunted-looking, ghost of Christmas future, black robes torn, floating beings that hover over a human and start to suck out the soul, spirit, and life of the people that they're attacking. And they're the guards of the magic prison. And they apparently have been loose, and so now they're attacking Harry and the cousin, and they're hovering over them, sucking the life out of them. And man, aren't there just those people in your life that come around and they hover over you, and it just feels like they suck the fun and the life and the spirit out of an entire room? And if you have too much contact with these things, then they start to suck the life out of you. And then Harry manages to get out his wand and does the Expelliarmus or Patronus or whatever, this burst of a light that he flings at them, and it shoots these Dementors off into space. He saves himself, then he saves his cousin. And just then this little old lady comes and says, don't put the wand away, they may come back, and then they go back. And I found this to be useful, because that's how the news feels to me lately. If you're watching the Helene coverage on media, mainstream media, and on social media especially, I don't know what's going on. But I can tell you it feels like news and social media is like this other world, right? Like it's an alternate universe that exists on the outside of my real life. And then I plug into it, and it's this gloomy, dark cloud of unhappiness. And if I spend too long in it, it sucks the very life out of me. Like, I just think of social media and the news and current events now as this unhappy world to plug into. And I think with AI, this has to be total BS, but there was a study that just recently came out that said 99.9% of the content you will see online by 2025 will be AI generated and total nonsense. Which, like, all right, that's a year from now. Like, what? We're all just going to become AI bots? So I think that just can't be right, just based on a gut feeling. But let's say it is. Let's say that within 1 to 2 years, every single thing you see online, except for the people that you know in real life. No, that's not even true. Everything you see online will be AI generated, because the people that you know in real life will be sharing nonsense. Like an AI generated image of a dog carrying a baby. And that boomer will be going, I can't believe Kamalianist is not helping these people. It's so good that dogs are helping these babies. Let's say everything you see online is fake. That's frightening, right? You're not going to be able to trust anything. And it really feels like at this point, something has changed in this election cycle. Congressman Mark Kelly was on one of the Sunday shows this week, I think Face the Nation on CBS, and said that 20 to 30% of what you see online now is AI pushed by foreign nations, China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. That really feels right. I have no way to fact check him. I don't know. Like, I'm just a guy in a podcast studio in Indianapolis, right? But doesn't it feel like something has snapped in the American psyche? Doesn't it feel like the pace of bullcrap has greatly increased in the last few weeks? This particular presidential cycle feels more chaotic and weirder, and people believing more nonsense than anyone I can remember, including 2020 when we had COVID going on and everybody was just sitting on their computers. Yeah, people, maybe I believe this quote-unquote conspiracy theory, but I'm not going to put that online. Now everybody's just putting it all out there. What happens when we cannot trust the internet? Because we have really, for 25, 30 years, gone all in on using the internet as our main way to organize people, our main way to learn things, our main way to get news. And we have let atrophy local news outlets, for instance. So we have no idea what's going on in North Carolina. Like, how can we expect to know what's actually happening in Israel and Jordan and Ukraine? We can't find out what's going on in Asheville. Like, we're sitting here as a nation going, are those Springfield people actually eating the dogs or not? Because you've got all these influencers flying into Ohio, interviewing like a dude with a Trump hat going, yeah, I seen him. There are 35 cats in that van, and they was all being eaten. I saw it. And then everybody's sharing this like there's a place for first-person accounts. But you expect me to believe that this dude just saw 35 cats in a van going off to a Haitian restaurant. I don't buy that, right? So it's hard to look at this stuff and go, is FEMA or is FEMA not funding immigrants? I think the answer is yes, because the White House has said FEMA is helping with the migrant crisis back in 2020. But I don't know if that's why they're broke. They always seem to be broke, right? I'm going to get Reinhold on here and we'll talk about FEMA because he seems to have a lot of information about FEMA. Because if the right wing says it, Reinhold's real big on fact checking it right now. But he has a lot of educational things to say. But this episode is really not about that, like what's actually happening. This episode is like how to think about the future of information and what to trust. Because my goal here is for you not to feel so chaotic and feel so confused about things. I want you to feel empowered. I want you to make a difference instead of feeling like you're not making a difference and that you just need to be paralyzed into non-action. And part of why you feel paralyzed into non-action is because that is the goal. That is what a foreign nation, or really these political campaigns that are American campaigns, like Trump's campaign, like even Kamala's campaign, like their goal is to get everybody to be overloaded with information. Because if I can get you confused, if I can get you shrunk down into fear because I don't even know what to believe, then you become way more easily controlled. I'm just going to go with the tribe because I can't make a rational decision, so I'm just going to have to go with my gut. And my gut says this cultural worldview of Kamala matches my cultural worldview better than Trump's and vice versa. So really the goal of social media now is for everybody to pump so much crap into your head that they can easily manipulate and control you. And everybody is a willing participant in this permission structure, right? Trump says something about cats and dogs. And then there's all of these right-wing influencers that feel that they have to prove him right. So you get Christopher Rufo finding some video of 2 chickens being cooked. And this is from the town over, but it's definitely cats. And I know they're not Haitian, but it just proves that this is all true. You have, and I'm not picking on the right only here, because there are plenty of examples of left-leaning. We'll get to the left and the mainstream media in a minute, but let's just take the right-wing media, because that gets more discussed, right? Someone like Trump will say something, and then the fact checkers in the mainstream media go, this isn't true. I can't believe this idiot would say something like this. It's just not true. It's just not true. Don't believe it. So then that makes like the right-wing bloggers mad. So then they have to prove the mainstream media wrong, even if it's manufacturing or fudging evidence to try and fit it into the box. And then both sides are trying to find little facts to prove themselves right, as opposed to just using some common sense. That Haitians do have a strong connection to voodoo, which does involve animal sacrifice, which is often chickens. Okay, so if you have some chickens missing, and maybe there are some cats missing that were feral, but there hasn't been one report of anybody having missing cats. And the real goal of all of that was to dehumanize Haitians and to make this population look foreign and evil and un-American, and this is why we can't have immigration. Like, there is a political motive behind the myth, the making of it all. But it's like we're not even stepping back to look at the point of the conversation. We're all just trying to jump into the conversation. And people on the right and the left are trying to prove the other side wrong and tit for tatting their way to absurdity. And then those of us in the middle are going, okay, that sounds like a fact that makes sense. Oh, that's a good point. They have a refutation of that. And we never step back and go, why are we even having this conversation? Why do I care? If there are cats being eaten in Ohio, I really don't care. I'm a cat guy. I have 4 cats. I would hate for one of them to be stolen and eaten. But that's not happening. Why am I involved in this conversation at all to begin with? That doesn't matter to me. The FEMA conversation. The conversation is not, are they confiscating people's homes? Because that's not happening. The conversation should be, why is FEMA getting there, setting up the trailers today when people are at day 10 getting their power back? Libertarian guy named Jason Lyons, I think he hosts Muddy Water Medias, maybe? I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong. Just got his power back today. It's day 10. Another friend on Facebook said, yeah, I just drove through North Carolina, and here's the FEMA trailers. I was on the ground, and they just got the FEMA trailers working today. So we're like day 10 into this. We needed the trailers day 2. All right, I'll give you a day, maybe 2. You can't get the trailers there to set them up, but day 10, that's when you're getting the trailers there? It took Joe Biden 7 days to get 500 National Guardsmen there? What was going on in the government response? And this is always the government response. Catastrophe happens. The Cajun Navy, the churches, the various rednecks in the area are all in their boats with their chainsaws. Companies, private companies are moving in their electrical trucks. You saw the convoys of ambulances. Local municipalities around the country go, we've got an extra fire engine and an ambulance to spare. Send them on down there. These people are on the ground within 24 hours. And then 5 days after that, after most of the hard work has been done in terms of clearing roads, getting people some basic necessities, Starlink with Elon Musk was up and running, there's some stability. Obviously, there's no restoration at 10 days later after a catastrophe like this. But there is some stability in terms of, okay, my world is, I have a bottle of water, right? I don't know how to explain stability. I've never been through something like this, but it seems to me like by day 10, everybody has a feeling of, okay, here's where I can get some meals. Here's how we're going to clean up our town. Here's who's been lost. Here's what's been destroyed. You're not in that chaotic first few moments when you really need coordination. But the federal government cannot do that because a bureaucracy cannot do that. And so FEMA gets there in all of these disasters day 5 to 10 and then says, actually, everything needs to coordinate through us. And you have to obey us because we're FEMA, we're the federal government. And then they step on toes. You've had all this camaraderie built between all the people on the ground actually doing the work. And then FEMA comes in and steps on toes. And then you get these stories of, yeah, they confiscated our stuff or told us that we couldn't come in the area to help clear things out. Because if FEMA has moved into the area and said, we're responsible for, let's say, this square mile, they don't want just some random with a chainsaw coming in because now the federal government is liable if you get hurt. And they don't want to get sued, so they can't let you in. Now, they can't control what the churches do because they're, I don't know why, but there's an exception that churches cannot be controlled, so people just join in groups with churches to start clearing brush. Maybe it's a separation of church and state type deal, or the fact that the churches do all the hard work of being the hands and feet of mobilization to get things to these areas. Asheville, North Carolina is headquarters of World Magazine, which is a Presbyterian-leaning Christian magazine. The Presbyterians are all over this. The Presbyterians are going to save the world, man. I'm a former megachurch guy going to a Presbyterian church, and the amount of organization in terms of mercy and relief that Presbyterians do is really unbelievable and rivals the Catholic Church in a lot of ways. And then on top of that, man, the Presbyterians are involved in all kinds of local charities, and they're involved in all kinds of different organizations in the city. It's really awesome to see. But you get this all the time where FEMA comes in, throws its weight around, ticks off the locals, bungles the operation. They're too late, too cocky. There's always these problems. And then they're always out of money. FEMA never has any money. This goes back to Katrina. Right? They're too late and too out of money. And so there's always a huge problem with There's somebody taking pictures out the window right now. I work in a co-working space. That's where my studio is. And she's giving a tour, and so the guy was taking video of the podcast studio, which if you want to rent the podcast studio, you can, leadersandlegends.net. Come rent out my podcast studio. What was I saying? Sorry. Just taking video of me. Got me off track here. So yeah, FEMA is just not a good organization in terms of immediate response. They just don't have that capability. It's better done through private means. Right, and it makes sense that if the federal government's going to move in National Guard and all these different federal agencies, then maybe there'd be an agency that coordinates the federal agencies, but the federal agency should not be coordinating the private industries. Like, you don't get jurisdiction over a disaster area. That, to me, seems crazy and counterproductive. You should have coordination and cooperation. But the FEMA system seems to be broken and doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. But what they're not doing is taking over homes. Seeing people say that this whole storm was completely made up. Like, they have weather control technology now. We don't, Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted this out. We don't get a definition of who they are, but they are very powerful. The Jews. They are very powerful. They can create entire Category 5 hurricanes and then aim that hurricane directly at the quartz mines that control all of the AI technology, right? Now, this quartz is used in AI technology. It is not the quartz that is used for all of AI, right? It's an important mineral in terms of building processing for AI. And apparently, there's 2 mines in North Carolina, I believe it's North Carolina, that's shut down right now because obviously the road that connects these 2 mines and then the road that connects that road to the interstates is closed. It just doesn't exist anymore. So in order to control AI, because these AI companies are not obeying the big companies, created a whole hurricane and then managed to control that hurricane and get it to hit these mines. That doesn't make any freaking sense. The laws of nature, if you think this, then you believe that government or whatever shadow government exists in the world has now been given the power to create like God, which means that you have made your God. You are participating in a form of idolatry. And I see this so often in a lot of right-wing politics. I'm only saying right-wing because I watch right-wing politics more than I watch left-wing. I don't have left-leaning friends, really. But there's a form of Gnosticism that is developing. Like, some of these people who believe the weather technology stuff are moving out of politics and into religion. So it's very in vogue, like the rise of the New Puritans and John McWhorter's book about the woke church, and it's very popular over the last 5 to 7 years to say that there is a secular church being built around identity or around sexuality that people are finding meaning and redemption in, and the way that they behave mimics the Puritans and a church. And I agree with all of that. The right is now developing its own Gnostic religion that is stemming out of politics but becoming something bigger. If you are in this vein of conspiracy thinking, you're starting to buy into a religion and becoming catechized with every major event by a new theory. Every single week there is a new theory. We've all got these Facebook friends. I've probably got more than most just because of this podcast, but where every single event is a CIA plant, or a BlackRock is involved, or this or that. There are times, I think, in the beginning of that stuff where you could go, yeah, BlackRock, all right, that's a weird connection. But then BlackRock is involved in every major tragedy for the last 5 years, so they're up to something every week, sometimes 3 times a week. This BlackRock has really got a lot of people on the payroll just dedicated to mayhem. Like, it starts to strain credulity. It starts to outstretch the bounds of reality and rational thinking. So like just the sheer amount of bull crap that you start to see from some of your Facebook friends who just seem to fall for everything. You go, do you not understand like the basic limits? Like 9/11, okay? How many people do you have to reasonably keep quiet for the last 23, 24 years for 9/11? Okay, you've got to keep quiet the dozens of security guards that worked in the building. You've got to keep these agents who planted the thermite in the building. You've got to keep quiet anybody that might have been in the building the week before when all of this was being planted. You've got to keep quiet like the dumpster, like the guy emptying the dumpster, right? So like you eventually get up to 1,000 people that the government has to keep quiet. And none of those people are coming forward in 23 years. Do you know how hard it is to get people to shut their mouth about things? Especially in this day and age where everybody wants to be on Instagram preening about what they've done. Watch Miss Pat Settles It on BT on Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. But yeah, how many people in this country are involved in shenanigans that have to be kept quiet now? We're talking about a significant amount of hush money and murders. It ultimately comes down to if you possess this secret knowledge about the universe, about the way that humans interact, where there is this secret group of people subjecting the world to their desires to build a neo-feudal state. If you understand this secret knowledge and how they operate and can see the signs, then you are part of the elect. And if we can convert enough people into our way of thinking and wake them up and get them to see the truth, then all of a sudden we can save the world from these demons. You see how that's very religious in its overtones? It's salvific. It's evangelical. It's secret knowledge. Memes are its scripture, right? Like there's this formation that is happening in internet culture that is getting people to join this new right-wing Gnostic religion. This moral structure where we are moral people and we are a people of faith, but then we also hold this other faith close to ourselves. That ultimately is idolatry, because what it says is that you are so significant that you can save the world by believing and understanding these secret truths. It's really something. It's from a Christian perspective, it is idolatry. Like you are perverting reality and pridefully promoting yourself as a savior of the world. You are being discordant and spreading things that aren't true, even if you're a bit naive. Because of this, the mainstream media just has this odious reaction to all of it. They can't control thought anymore. And so when they see a thought that they no longer like, there's an immediate judgment being cast. And anything said by some of these figures, so let's say these are the new priests of this new kind of religion, like Russell Brand. And I'm not saying these gues are all in on the conspiracy theories, right? I don't think the Rally the Republic people who spoke, Jimmy Dore, Russell Brand, Jordan Peterson, I don't think they're all in on the weather technology is destroying these minds, right? They're not like Alex Jones thinking it's lizard people, but they're more than willing to kind of court some of this for their own purposes and believe some of it, right? Tucker Carlson, I would put in there. They're more driven, I think, by the reaction of the mainstream media towards the totally insane people, right? Like they look at it and go, like, why are you just dismissing this person? Well, I don't know. They like Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks there's weather technology that can destroy minds. Like we have the ability to control the weather. I'm not going to dismiss that some cloud seeding doesn't exist. Of course it does. But you're going to just use cloud seeding to create a Cat 5 hurricane and aim it at the right spot? Like, come on. Right? So the mainstream media will just take this stuff and scoff. And then that makes like the traditional right-wing media go, well, how dare you put these people down? And so then we just get into this whole tit for tat. And there is like just this arrogance that just drives me crazy. And I guess I am in this camp. Like I see the way that people talk about people on the right, and it really is totally dehumanized. And I see more dehumanization speech leveled at right-wing people than I do at right-wing people talking about left-wing people. The right-wing people definitely have their own feelings of superiority and dismissal towards people on the left. And there is definitely a very racist group of right-wing people who are very... But I think in general, when I talk to right-wing people, like they're just like, yeah, I'm voting for him because I'm tired of being picked on. But I don't know. I'm rambling at this point. So what do we do? All right, let's bring it home, because it's just watching these conversations that go on, because I'm very blessed to have like people on the left and on the right, and like everybody sneering at each other. And what do we do? First, we have heard for years about the crisis of democracy that will happen when local media outlets go out of business and disappear. And I think we are seeing the fruits of that crisis of democracy. I am not anti-journalist. I'm very pro-journalist, because I think journalists play a very important role in our society. And while I understand media bias, have been a victim of media bias in my career, and understand the groupthink of journalists, they still perform a very important function. As I said in a recent show, watch any talk radio show. They are just using mainstream news outlets. They're using reporting from other people and talking about their opinion about this article. Maybe they're saying nuh-uh, but maybe they're finding patterns, but they're using mainstream outlets, right? Because you need someone to dedicate their time to go out into Asheville, talk to FEMA, talk to citizens, talk to people who are anti-FEMA, right? Find the story, find the balance of what's actually happening. Maybe not come to a consensus. This is where so many mainstream journalists fall flat, is that they go into a story with their consensus already decided. And they're bias hunting, looking for facts that validate what FEMA says is the truth, right? This is the great tragedy of modern journalism, is that it's not Woodward and Bernstein anymore, where they don't trust the government because the government is inherently the problem. It's the right-wingers that are the problem now, right? If the government is saying, no, that's not true, and it disproves what a right-winger is saying, then the government is now the arbiter of truth. That is inherently a problem. If FEMA says, no, we're not doing this, a journalist shouldn't just write that as if that is the truth and this is the fact. They should be on the ground, looking at what FEMA is doing, taking the concerns of the people who have a problem with government and balancing that and finding where is the median here? Where's the truth, right? Like, it's easy just to prove if all the money has been spent on migrants, right? Did the White House authorize and demand that FEMA respond to the migrant crisis and spend a lot of money, and then Republicans didn't reappropriate FEMA because of that? Okay, well, that's the story, right? And you could say, look, FEMA shouldn't be used for non-American citizens. All right, we can have that argument. And we can have the argument of whether or not Republicans should or should not fund FEMA. Like, those are very provable things because there's a paper trail of money. But I can't really go and say there's not two sides. Like FEMA, let's say FEMA is not stealing people's houses. There's no two sides to that. There's no two sides to the Holocaust. There's the correct side and there's the not correct side, right? So I don't think that you have to balance everybody's views and take I think you do have to listen to everybody. You don't have to take everybody seriously because you have to understand the story. But the problem is none of that is possible now because journalists don't have the resources to do any of that, especially at the local level. Like a journalist who lives in Asheville, their house is destroyed like everybody else. They're trying to survive. But there's not a lot of journalists in nearby towns that can get to Asheville to find out what's going on, which then gets put into local outlets. Because how many times do you read an article or listen to a newscast and they're relying on the local news to tell the story? CBS is porting into KTLA when the OJ chase is happening because KTLA has a helicopter on the ground following the white Bronco, but CBS News can't, in a matter of minutes, scramble a helicopter. They have the same problem that FEMA has, right? Like, they're an overarching national organization that can't be everywhere at once. That's unrealistic. So you have to build a network of partners, of trusted news partners, that when things happen in a region or a locality, you have people that you can contact and start to say, okay, what's happening? What's happening? But if local newspapers don't exist and local radio news no longer exists and local television has 4 people working in it and they all use their iPhones and they're off for the weekend because they can't make somebody work 80 hours a week, then we don't know what's going on in Asheville, do we? So the erosion of local news is contributing to this problem. And so what happens is these major news outlets just start to default to government officials on the ground. Which, like, I'm not the type to say, like, all government employees are liars. I'm not that guy. But government always has its side of the story and doesn't ever think it does anything wrong. Like, I'm an old school journalism guy. Like, government needs to be checked because they have the ultimate power of the monopoly of violence. So therefore, we can't just take their word for it. We have to check them because we live in a democratic republic. Part of why things feel so out of control and we can't figure out what's happening in a Springfield or an Asheville is because we don't have traditional journalistic outlets in these areas. We have influencers with a YouTube channel and a bias and a structure of incentive to tell their version of the truth so they can get more eyeballs. That's different than an editorial. Like, this podcast is different than a journalistic enterprise where it is me talking into a microphone. I've probably gotten 7 things wrong, and there's not going to be a layer between me and your ears. I'm going to publish this without anybody else listening to it editorially to say, hey, did you think about maybe X? Or did you think about Y? Or you just got this totally wrong in this part. Which is why you need to listen to me very carefully, and you need to Google everything I say, right? Because I'm one guy who understands news literacy, who pays attention to these things, but I am a fallible human being who can make mistakes. And even if I had 2 editors listening to this telling me what's right and wrong, they'll get things wrong. The New York Times gets things wrong because it is human beings who are operating the New York Times. We're fallible fallen creatures. But the likelihood of the New York Times getting something wrong versus me getting something wrong, I think they win, right? Because they have a process. Their whole day is dedicated to finding a story and then having somebody else verify that story that is outside the reporter's frame of reference. Whereas I have 2 full-time jobs and 3 podcasts and a family. So, look, you just have to be careful. And so I think, number 1, we have to start thinking about local journalism. Indianapolis has had several local journalist outlets come in. That's been very helpful. I think you can be part of the solution. Like Boss Hog of Liberty, look at what they have done in Newcastle for the last 5 to 7 years or whatever it's been. Maybe it's been 8 at this point. Week in, week out, Jeremiah, Dakota, and the rest of the guys out in Newcastle get together in their headquarters at 7 p.m. on Thursday and talk about the news of the day in the town with newsmakers. They are the debate forum for local news outlets. They have the candidate series. Maybe the newspaper will try, but really it's like the Boss Hog on their Facebook live stream is the media outlet. It isn't hard to start it. It just takes consistency and inviting people to come on your show. Like, maybe they aren't a pure journalistic outlet like the newspaper, but They get a lot right, and you're better informed about what's happening in Newcastle thanks to them. They do an important service for that town. They present the news of Henry County in East Central Indiana in a digestible format that people enjoy because they're relatable people. And they're not trying to screw anybody, and they're not trying to get you to vote for anybody or buy anything. Like, they love their town, and they want to talk about what's going on. You can do that. The second is recognize that everything you see online from here, this is the best it is ever going to be in terms of fake news on the internet. It is only going to get worse. And the whole purpose of it is American actors wanting to get you confused so you trust their version of events so you will vote for them and give them power and money. Or it is foreign actors who want to completely destroy this country. And the only people that you should trust are the people that you know. And if they're posting third-party content, you shouldn't trust them either. I see this all the time. I saw a Twitter thread today from a guy who is rescuing people in North Carolina. He is clearly a regular guy doing good work, and he was critical of FEMA in very specific ways. That's a credible guy who has shown, A, he's a real person, B, he's on the ground doing the work through photos, videos, and text, and then C, the ground having conversations and giving credible information about FEMA. Not credible information is like a Facebook group post that I saw today of a woman saying, I've heard in Asheville that FEMA is blah, blah, blah. You're not in FEMA. You don't know. If it's coming from your friend of a friend, I don't believe you anymore. I'm just not going to buy it, okay? I want to hear from the first guy, and I want to hear from the second lady. I'm just guilty of this. I just click share all the time. I do it too. I see it, I click share. I just have to extricate myself from the environment. I have to, why do I want to hang out in the environment that has the Dementors when I could live in the light, which is in real life with human beings that I love and can touch with their permission? So recognize that this is the best it's ever going to be for information on the internet. You're going to have to make some choices about how much social media time you actually want to be involved in it, because when you were on social media, you were being formed. There's the Christian idea of formation. You are being formed by the content that you see. It is not a question of if, it is a question of what. So as Christians, we talk a lot about spending time reading the Bible and praying because we want you to be formed by the Word. We want you to be formed by the Word of God and the Spirit of God through shaping us through the Word and prayer and worship so we can grow closer to Christ and our Christian identity. Right? Or are you being formed by TikTok and Instagram and algorithms from people who want to sell you things? Or are you being formed by Fox News or CNN, right? Where are you spending the majority of your diet? Because where you're spending the majority of your time receiving information and entertainment, that's what's forming you. So you better think carefully about what you're taking in and how it's forming you, because that's what you will transform into. I just think if you are a long-time listener to this show, there's a change in me. I don't curse nearly as much. I try to be more... I will be honest with you, listener. I am a little bit behind on posting on the show because I am completely paralyzed by this show. Because I used to just get on here and go with it, right? And now I want to be accurate. And I'm so paralyzed by saying something to you that isn't true that I don't even get around to doing the show because I'm scared of doing the show now. I don't want to lead you astray. Not good for business because I need to be here. I need to be here with you. But I have a tremendous... It's just a night and day thing for me over the last 13 years. Because back then, the ambition was to be famous, to do this show, to get my own talk radio show. Now, the goal is to spend time with friends me talking to you, me talking with my friends, and trying to understand, as opposed, like I used to want to get you to vote for the Libertarian Party and convince you to be a part of a political movement. Now I want you to be a whole, healthy person that understands your world in a better, maybe I can be a small contribution to you understanding the world in a different way. Not an all-consuming thought that you have moving through the day. So I will admit to you that I'm undergoing a severe crisis of confidence in all of this. In every show that I do, and every bit of, I've spent my whole 25, 30 years, 20 years of a career working towards a goal, and I don't know that I have that goal anymore. I don't know. I don't have that ambition to be like a famous talk radio guy. So I don't know. There's a whole podcast on all that I'll do some other time. But first, find good, solid local media. You can physically go meet members of your local media. You can call up your newspaper, TV, or radio guy and say, can I buy you lunch? And they will probably say yeah. Or you can go to their physical events and talk to them and meet them. And you will feel differently after you've done that than just reading them. Second, limit your time on social media and understand that everything from here on out is to manipulate you. This world of dementors, this black cloud that exists over all of us, is a choice. You can choose to participate in a formation that leads you somewhere that isn't healthy, or you can choose to live a healthier life outside of it. Third, local networks are going to be at a premium, because when nobody trusts anything, people that they can meet in person will be everything. So if you are looking to the future, you need to build local networks, local organizations. Maybe you don't have to build anything. Maybe it's just a matter of going and finding a networking group. Find an interest and go to a group. I run a podcaster meetup here in Indianapolis. I'm thinking about starting like a meetup for like listeners of this show who would be into like Christian libertarian stuff, maybe a book club. I don't know. I'm like so far down the road. I'm trying to think about how can we as an audience here get together locally now that I've got this little clubhouse at Switchboard. How can we build local networks of people? You don't have to start something. You could just find an interest and join. You can go to the city council meetings. You can go to the game night at the local bookstore. You can just go out and meet people, because knowing people in your local community is going to be a premium. Like it's like I'd liken it to the job search, right? You can send out 500 resumes on LinkedIn and never get a response back. But if you have a healthy network of 10 solid people that can recommend you for things, you're probably going to get a job from the 10 versus the 500. I think civics, politics, religion, friendship, all of that is going to revert back to in-person local networks. It's not that the internet will not have happened, but we're going back to 1950s America when it comes to in-person. Because in the next 5 to 10 years, we're just not going to trust any of this. I could be an AI-generated voice. I could just be not a real human being, and you won't know that unless you can show up and touch me voluntarily. I think you have to, if you are a Christian, then you should be in a church. But if you're a secular person and you're not into church, first, consider it. Second, if you're not going to be, you really need to find local in-person connection. And if you're like a 30-year-old who moves to a city and you're not religious, like how do you make friends? Maybe if you're not in politics, you can make friends if you volunteer on a campaign. But if you're not into politics and you're not religious, I don't know how you'd make friends and meet people. And I think that has to change. I think it is changing a little bit. There's like Indianapolis has something called Indie Hub that specifically works on that problem. We're going to do an interview with them at some point. But I personally have gotten involved in this organization. I'm the host of a new podcast, believe it or not, me on a new podcast. It's called Big Hearted Indie. And it's for a group called Citizen 7 that really focuses on building relationships amongst men that care for the common good of the city of Indianapolis. Love for you to go check it out. Please go subscribe to it. Even if you're not from Indy, you're going to learn. There's so many nuggets of wisdom from these guys that Don, Greg, and I talk to. Throw one in the feed just so you can get a taste of it. Their whole goal is just building points of relationship, breakfasts, social outings, retreats, fun activities, right? Like just anything to get guys in person, in community, building friendships. And they're smart because what they know is what I've talked about. Like men need good, clean fun, and they need a shared project. Like men generally are not going to just go hang out with their friends on a Friday night because. But a lot of men will like justify community if they can work on a shared project. So can you get involved in a shared project in your local town where you can meet people? I think that's going to be really important. So those are my 3 suggestions. You can't save the world. You really have to narrow your view. You have to narrow your vision. I'm going to just talk about this all the time. It's the crux of the show. I'm just going to get more and more OCD about repeating. Maybe OCD is offensive. I don't know. Sorry. But like more repetitive on this. You should understand what's going on in Ukraine and Israel and Asheville and Springfield to the best of your ability. Why? Because you should be an informed person about what is happening in the world to make good decisions and then also to respond to those people in love. Maybe there are charities that you can donate to. And you should be an informed citizen about where your tax dollars are going and what's functioning and what's not. But you are not required to save Asheville, Ukraine, Israel, and Springfield. You are not called to have a constant heart of concern for places and people that are not in your immediate sphere. You are called to love the 100 people that are coming to your funeral. You are called to serve and commit acts of love and service for the people in your 100-person circle. That is who you're supposed to. You are supposed to build a strong foundation personally. You are to build a strong family, and I'd say friendships, and then work in your local community for the common good. That is your responsibility as a person in your public world. Okay? That is where you are to act. That is where you are called to be responsible. Your person, your family, friends, and your local community. But this idea that you are to carry the weight of saving every town and city in this country or world is impossible, and it should not be put upon you, and it is not your burden to carry. Know what's going on, but don't bear the responsibility. And second, please do not think that your vote in November is going to save the world. Again, that's idolatry. Things are more likely to stay the same depending on who wins this election than they are to change in an extreme way. But what we're fighting about right now is worldviews. Okay? And it's not even just, if you look at Bush v. Gore or Bush versus Kerry, like that's probably the best explanation. You are fighting for a Christian conservative worldview where we want to limit to or eradicate abortion. We want to protect the country with war, right? Versus like a secular humanist worldview where technology is supreme and it can perfect human beings and bring about a utopia by building machines. And I don't know. Like, we'll get into worldviews in other episodes, but you want to understand the concept. A Christian Manifesto by Francis Schaeffer. It's a good way to start, because what he does in that book is articulate the Christian worldview and the secular humanist worldview, and it breaks it apart. Because when you're growing up and you're secular like I was, you just think everybody thinks this way. You think like an Enlightenment thinker. Everyone should just be rational. Everyone should be striving for the common good. And the common good is more liberalism. And I don't mean in like just the democratic sense. I mean allowing more and more to have, right? Like not social conservatism, which tells you to, through the government, to live a certain way, right? Secular humanism I think it's just the air that we breathe, right? So we look at the Christians and we go, like, why does James Dobson think this about gay marriage? This is weird. You're a freak. Okay, if you understand their worldview and you think from a Christian worldview in a different way, you understand them better than, like, just dismissing it, right? What am I doing? Where am I going with this? And what I'm talking about in terms of the Gnosticism of the right now, this moral deism of the right, where God is alive but not active in our lives, and so therefore we need to change the culture to be more moral. And God doesn't speak on what morality is. We as a group are deciding what morality is. That's really what's happening in one wing of the Republican Party, of the right. And then you have the QAnon people who are like the right-wing Gnostics, right? And then on the left, you have the identity people. And then vast majority of the country, their religion is their career. Like, they're not even thinking about politics, right? They're thinking about, how can I make more money? How can I be more materialistic? But then everybody lumps themselves into two camps of, I'm more in the secular humanist worldview, so I'm voting for Kamala, or I'm more of the Christian worldview, so I'm voting for Trump. And if my worldview doesn't win, then my worldview is going to lose in this catastrophic religious fight. None of this is the beauty of pluralism. Pluralism allows us to all collaborate and cooperate and learn to work together in more of a harmonious cooperation. So we're going to talk about pluralism and liberalism and worldviews and a lot of this stuff that I'm not totally prepared to talk about, but I've been thinking a lot about, because I think when you start to really think about worldviews and values and formation and where people are coming at from things ideologically, from their own inner impulses, things start to make sense a little bit more, and you start to feel a little less panicked. And it's always been this way, and it's never going to change. Like, maybe there's some danger from AI taking us all over. I'm sure that is totally possible. Climate change, I'm a little bit more on board with that now that there is hurricanes causing destruction across the entire East Coast. But we're going to just continue to explore all this stuff here on the Chris Spangle Show and some of these things. But I think thinking about thinking is really important. Let's just start to step back and give yourself some space and break your routines and examine the 50,000-foot view of all this, as opposed to just, I got to be in the fight. You don't have to be in the fight. You don't have to vote. If you don't vote, the world's not going to, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. So I'm not voting for anybody for president. I think I told you that last time. And you know what? Doesn't matter. My vote's not going to change a thing. What matters is I'm a dad and a husband. Like, I have officially, the second I became a dad and a husband, my funeral became about that. That's what my funeral's about. It is not about this. It is not about BET. It is not about Bob and Tom. It is not about any of that. It is about the soccer games that I go to. It is about the hugs that I give. It is about being a son to my mom and my dad. That's what it's about. So if you're ruining those things over politics, then you are in grievous error and you have to step back from it. So focus on what matters. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me. I truly appreciate it. You all are the best. Thank you especially to our patrons for keeping all of this going. Quite frankly, without the patrons, I just couldn't do this, couldn't afford to do it, couldn't afford to keep it going. And they are the ones that keep us flowing. So thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.